I'm proud to say that with the passage of our budget in the House of Representatives here in Washington, D.C., that we are beginning to move this nation down a very important path, and that path is the path to prosperity. And in taking the path to prosperity, we will put the federal government on track to do something that has not been seen in Washington in a long time, and that is to balance the federal budget. Think about that, a balanced federal budget. And that is something the American people aren't used to hearing, since over the last 4 years, the federal government has run deficits in excess of $1 trillion every year, and nearly $6 trillion has been added to our national debt. That has to stop, and our budget stops it. Our budget immediately begins to reduce the deficit, and in 2023, the federal government will actually produce a surplus under this budget, all without raising taxes on hard-pressed American taxpayers in this very difficult economy. And that isn't just a Republican majority saying that our budget balances over time. It is the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which is in agreement with us. So how do we do it? Well, we tackle 4 important areas that will put this nation, as I say, on the path to prosperity and toward a balanced budget. We start by tapping into our nation's vast untapped energy reserves and approving the Keystone Pipeline. Oil, natural gas, and coal reserves, which we have in abundance. Opening our energy reserves found on federal lands will not only raise money for the federal government and reduce our deficit, it will also help us to create good, high-paying American jobs, lower energy prices for hard-pressed consumers, and make us North American energy independent, which is so important. Second, we reform health care. We begin by repealing Obamacare, and we replace it with patient-centered reforms that will actually reduce our costs. And we will protect Medicare with no changes for those born before 1958, and we apply common sense reforms so future generations have a program that is sound, that is stable, and that they can count on being there when they retire. Third, we enact meaningful welfare reform. And we build upon the welfare reforms enacted in 1996 that helped lower child poverty rates by double digits. And it gives states greater flexibility to tailor programs like Medicaid and food stamps to the needs of those that really need the safety net. And we don't measure success by how much we spend, but instead we focus on how much everyday people, the American people, are helped. And finally, we enact much-needed pro-growth tax reform. The current tax code is so incredibly complex that it requires Americans to spend more than 6 billion hours and about $160 billion just to comply with our current tax law. The corporate tax code is not only the most complex, but it is also the highest in the entire world, in the entire planet, making it much more difficult for American companies to compete in the global marketplace. Under our budget, we simplify the tax code by eliminating special interest tax deductions and loopholes, which are enjoyed by a few with the best lobbyists, which allows us to lower rates for everyone with a goal of just 2 tax rates, 10% and 25%. And while under our plan the level of revenue the government takes in will remain the same, the number of hours needed to comply with the tax code would reduce significantly, giving more job creators the certainty and the needed resources to focus on growing their businesses and to create jobs. As well, it will allow families to focus on their bottom line, more time together instead of spending countless hours simply trying to comply with a very complicated tax code. This new level playing field created will promote economic growth, increased investment, and the creation of new jobs. And I believe by taking these steps that we will restore the promise of American opportunity, economic opportunity. And we will put our fiscal house in order and be able to leave a better and more prosperous America to future generations. Now, I have voted several times for a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. Unfortunately, that amendment hasn't been achieved by having the 2/3 support in Congress that is needed to then send it out to the states. But I don't think that the lack of a constitutional amendment should distract us from living within our means. And nor should we let the lack of a constitutional requirement keep us from balancing the budget. We need to balance the budget just because it is simply the right thing to do to grow our economy and to produce prosperity. And it simply isn't fair for us to continue to heap more debt and more debt on our children and our grandchildren. That keeps us from making the hard choices, from having the political will to get our fiscal house in order. And, we just otherwise are simply forcing future generations to pay for it. And that has to stop. Really, just as President Clinton worked with the Republican Congress back in the 1990s to balance the budget and to bring about a very prosperous economy at that time, I am very hopeful now that President Obama and the Senate Democrat majority will join us, the House majority, the Republican majority in the House, join us in this very important work. And today, I'm very proud and hopeful that with the passage of this common sense and forward-looking budget, that we have taken the first necessary step on the path to prosperity.